is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He told me today we're going to cover Gurps, and I said, what a perfect description of my hangover, Stu Horvath.
It does have a sort of kind of name, huh?
Yeah, it does. Well, folks, we are here the day after my 40th birthday party, so you'll have to excuse me if I'm a little slow on the uptake as we go.
Fair enough. I am too. I didn't even drink anything, but I'm tired.
Yeah, it's all the fried hot dogs.
Yeah, actually.
Delicious, delicious fried hot dogs.
Why'd I eat 4 of them?
Because they're delicious.
Well, yeah, but I knew.
And it's a party.
It was a party, and it was, but like, Jesus.
And I think my problem is that I ate too much birthday cake because I'm definitely like sugar high today.
That cake was really good. It was really moist.
Costco cake. Can't go wrong with it.
Yeah. Like,
perfect every time.
Seriously, I was really, I'm not really a cake guy. And I was just pleasantly surprised.
Oh, you'll always be pleasantly surprised and never let down by a Costco sheet cake.
I almost went for seconds, but I was just like, no, I had 4 hot dogs. I'm good.
I did.
Well, it's your birthday. You gotta.
Yeah, I'm paying for it now. So we are psyched because today we are going to crack into something that we've been talking about for a long time, and that is Steve Jackson's Gurps.
Indeed.
We are also going to talk a little bit about the character creation in Pendragon because we're going to be launching that pretty soon with our gaming group.
I can't wait.
Oh, I've never seen you this happy. I mean, there's like the birth of your child in this, so this is pretty good. First, though, we're going to talk about an amazing game that I finally got to play the other night called Cyclades. Did I say it right?
No.
How do you say it?
Cyclades.
That's what I said. Cyclades.
Cyclades does kind of, maybe you're right. I mean, that does have a more of like a Perseus kind of, Greek kind of sound. You might be right. Who knows? Who cares?
I'm probably really wrong. Either way.
It's your birthday. You're right.
I'm right about everything today. It's a game where you play in ancient Greece and you're trying to form a metropolis.
Yeah, or 2 metropolises.
Two metropolises. So what's cool about this game is it is like Clash of the Titans.
It is.
And you're like conquering little islands and you got your little soldiers and your boats and you can release krakens on people and you have to curry the favor of the gods, which is awesome.
Yeah, so this is actually a game. This is when we first started playing the board game club stuff, we started with Risk Legacy. And after that, like I finally had a group of people who wanted to play board games. So I got some of the classics, which were like Carcassonne and Ticket to Ride, like your basic sort of European style games.
Real over the plate games.
Yeah, nothing super, crazy. Cyclades was the first board game that I got that was weird and had like a whole bunch of mechanics and like seemed like a strategy game and had a whole bunch of miniatures and like seemed like there was a lot going on. And pleasantly, there isn't a lot going on. It's like deceptively complex.
It is deceptively complex. And the thing is, when you look at the box, there's a lot of miniatures.
Yeah.
There are a lot of cards.
Yep.
There are just a lot of everything.
A lot of little tokens. There's dice. There's
several different game boards that you could form into different little worlds.
Yeah, like that's a barrier in itself. It's just like, oh my God, there's like, do I have to use all 7 of these? I don't understand. It's based on how many people are playing. The board gets larger and smaller dependent.
Which I think is really clever. And I think it's a good use of a game board. So if you have the entry point, which is you versus another person, you have a very minimal amount of area to cover.
Yeah, because you got to be right on top of each other for the game to be competitive.
Absolutely.
And the basic mechanic of the game, everything is run through offerings to the gods. There's 5 gods, and you're competing for their favor, and their favor determines what you can do that round. It's great because your military troops are split into 2 types. You have the boats, which are Poseidon, and you have the soldiers, which is Ares. And to move your soldiers, you need Ares' favor. But if you don't have the boat in the right position, you need Poseidon's favor to get that boat there so that you can get to another island. So it divides combat up into 2 parts, and it makes it really hard.
Yeah, now for combat, we didn't actually get to actual combat.
No.
Which is amazing that there is a combat mechanic and you could absolutely go a full game without actually fighting anybody.
Yeah, it's very deceptive because you see the miniatures and they're all war miniatures. So you're like, okay, we're going to fight. And it really behooves you to not fight, I think. Although I think we had 2 new people playing this, you and Josh had never played this before. So I think that the combat is like a whole different system. So we sort of avoided that. Next game, maybe you guys will all be more inclined to fight.
Well, I think that is a thing with lots of games where there has to be a combat mechanic, especially when you have a field full of soldiers and a sea full of ships. There should be fighting, per se. In the end of the day, though, fighting in these games is often to your own detriment.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And you think like, oh, I'm going to get this guy, I'm going to fight. Like even when we played Scythe.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, we're going to fight. And the juice is never worth the squeeze.
Yeah, I've played several Scythe games where there was no combat at all or just one or two. And it's usually at the end just to get those stars for the victories. And I think the same thing is true at Cyclades. Like I went into that game no intention. I just wanted everybody to do their own thing and leave me alone so I could just get my stuff together. And I almost won.
You got so close.
Ian beat me. But
he snuck in like a thief in the night and he just pulled it out. And talking about fighting, what you can do besides fighting ship to ship and fighting with your soldiers, there are monsters that you can buy that do different things. Like the Pegasus, you could actually move your army without having to use Ares or Poseidon.
Yeah.
The Medusa will freeze your armies in one spot so you can't move them to another island. I pulled the Kraken. I bought the Kraken and I released the Kraken on our friend Ian, who ultimately won. And it did nothing.
Yeah.
Because the Kraken was there. I took out, I think, 3 of his ships, but because there was no actual combat going on, like I didn't destabilize his army. I did nothing.
No.
In the grand scheme of things, I completely wasted a move. It was sweet though, because the Kraken miniature looks so good.
Yeah.
It's a cool game. I really, really enjoyed it. And now that I fully understand it, I think I could figure out how to win next time.
Yeah, I'm really psyched that we blew the dust off of this one because we never really played it enough. And the best part about it is the games that we've played that were the best sessions of Cyclades were sort of like a series of Death Star runs.
Yes.
You know how like in A New Hope, they have to build up to their run and it's like, I'm going to go into the trench and I'm going to go and I'm going to shoot the torpedo and I missed. So like everybody is sort of trying to set up for their own little Death Star run in Cyclades. And it's a matter of timing. Like if you go too fast, you're not going to hit it. And if you go too late, you're not going to have time. So like there's a sweet spot where like everybody's trying to line that push up and hope that everything works. And if it works, you're going to win. And I think me, Ed, and Ian were all sort of getting near the trench.
Yeah.
And Ian got into the trench first. And me and Ed just waited a little too long.
Well, I think that is a great analogy.
And it's really exciting when that happens because like even if you go too early and you blow your run, like at least you did it. Like at least you gave it your all. And after that, you're like, I am out and I'm going to try and spoil it for somebody else.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a sign of a great game when you have that buzz. When you leave there and you're like, oh, man, that was good.
Yeah.
Like, it was good. Whether you win, whether you lose, you had a good time. And we had a good rev up to that point because we played Heimlich & Co. again.
Yep.
Which I almost won. And then we finished the night off with
Con of Cons.
Yeah. And I totally lost at Con of Cons.
I destroyed you all.
I was so bad.
My special ability was the one where you keep the cards face down. I had really no idea how many points I had. So when I was like, holy crap, 720 points.
Yeah.
How'd that happen? I was like, 100? Wow, I did really good this game.
Well, I'm glad it happened for you because it didn't happen for me.
Hey, happy birthday.
Thanks, man. So, folks, we recommend Cyclades. Cyclades? We recommend Cyclades, or however the hell Stu said it. It's a pretty awesome game, especially if you're a fan of risks and war games of that ilk.
Yep.
So with that, we are going to move on to the main course of the podcast. We're going to talk about Gurps.
Gurps. It's like, is it a belch? Is it a frog ribbiting? Is it somebody had too much to drink last night?
I've heard it both ways. It's a little column A, a little column B. Mostly column B for me, folks.
So Steve Jackson's Gurps came out in 1986, and it was not the first attempt at the creation of a universal role-playing system, but probably the most successful. So Gurps, if you don't know, stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System.
Easy.
Yeah.
I like a good acronym. Like SHIELD for role-playing game.
Yeah. And it's super, wait, what?
Like SHIELD for role-playing.
What does SHIELD stand for?
Strategic Homeland. How do you spell SHIELD? SHIELD.
Yeah.
So Strategic Homeland Intelligence Defense. I don't know. Oh, they're gonna drag me for that one.
Yeah, I feel like that was like a C+,
Yeah.
maybe. Just you get like points for knowing that it was an acronym.
I'm too hungover to try to lie my way through it.
So GURPS is easier than Shield. Did you ever play with us, actually?
No, we actually made characters, and Sean was going to run the game, and I forget why we never got to play it.
Because Sean was going to run the game.
That's fair.
But Sean did actually run a couple games for us back in the day, and we also played a long-term superheroes and eventually supervillains campaign with Gerard ages and ages ago. I love this system because it's just, you could do anything with it. I think it's particularly well suited to superheroes. I think it's my favorite system for running superheroes. But basically, you could create any kind of character you want as long as you have the source books.
Okay.
Depending on the GM, what kind of game they want to run, they always have the final say. And you're going to set a number of points that you're going to use to create your character, and then you spend those points on abilities. So if you have like a crazy high-powered campaign, you can create Galactus, or you can create something super weird like a Texan vampire dragon slayer. And
wow.
If you have the game to support it, you can play anything. And he has like a time machine and laser pistols. I don't know.
I mean, that tracks.
If you want to play it, as long as you have the Ultra Tech game and the time travel book and the dinosaur book and the vampire book.
So you need all of those different books to get the stats to be able to do that.
So yeah, that's sort of the downside. It's not really, you're never really going to play a game that crazy slipstream, right? Like I think that when we played GURPS with Sean the first time, it was just a weird Western horror game. So you just need like the Old West book if there was one and the horror book. Boom, you have your genre. And you limit your powers and stuff to those two books. Or if you want to do like a fantasy horror, you get those two books and smush them together. Superheroes is sort of where everything kind of comes in because everything kind of comes into play in a superhero world, right?
Right.
Like you have Thor, you have Doctor Strange, you have Iron Man, and those things naturally are not the same, but mix.
Right. All in the same universe.
Yeah.
So this sounds like it would be a better fit for the Marvel superheroes role-playing game, because if you have the power to really create and get all the nuances of the character, you could do that with GURPS.
Sure. Wow. Absolutely.
Okay.
Again, it depends on having the books that you want. Although the core superhero book has a lot of your basic, what you would think of as superpowers, like energy blasts and flying. It has all those core rules. But for flavor, if you wanted to play like a two-gun kid kind of character, you could pull the Western book and get like extra.
Or if you want to make Blade the vampire, you'd have to get the vampire book.
Yeah. Well, that's the other interesting thing is because they licensed a bunch of properties. So there is, Vampire the Masquerade, there's a GURPS version.
Really?
There's a GURPS version of Cyberpunk. There's a GURPS version of a whole bunch of weird science fiction properties. The Auto Duel board game has a GURPS version, which is sort of like Mad Max. So like there's all this stuff that's available. There's a book called Atomic Horror, which is really great, which is like them, like
that's
the Giant
fun.
Ants movie.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. They have a source book for The Prisoner, Hambone.
What?
Yeah, it's super freaking weird.
That is possibly the weirdest thing that you've ever. Oh my God, folks, for those listening at home, he's holding it up. It is wow. It's probably the weirdest thing that you've shown me so far since we've been on this journey together, Stu. Like of all things and properties that you could license out, The Prisoner was like what? How many seasons?
It was maybe 2. I feel like it was just one long season, though.
That's how it felt to me.
15 episodes, something like that.
Tops.
Yeah.
And wow.
In all fairness, like this is not a very good role-playing source book. I think The Prisoner is so freaking weird that I need a lot of guidance to be able to put together a Prisoner campaign.
I mean, the show itself wasn't like, if it was like 2 seasons, like that's not a lot of time to get into. It's not like, say, if they did a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where you have like 7 seasons worth of lore and experience that if you were a GM, you could be like, all right, so this book only goes so deep, but man, I know this universe.
Yeah.
I can make this thing play.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of elbow room in The Prisoner, but it's a really great kind of companion to the TV show. If I had this in the 90s when I was watching the show, I would have loved it.
Really?
Because like it kind of puts a lot of things in context and it acts as sort of like an episode by episode guide. So like
that's actually really interesting.
It is. It's super like not the greatest role-playing source book, but a really great just Prisoner book. If you're into The Prisoner and you can find this at a decent price, I highly recommend it. But you can use stuff from that in a different sort of espionage game that you're running as GURPS, or you could use it in your superheroes game and characterize your super spy in sort of a Prisoner way. And like, you know what I mean? Like it's totally modular and mixing and matching.
So yeah, everything kind of flows together nicely.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say nicely. It's a point buy system, and I feel like those inherently require a ton of bookkeeping, especially in your character progression. So I think that Gurps is a fairly simple and straightforward system, but in posting on the Instagram feed in the past about Gurps and calling it a simple and straightforward system, people were just like, you're friggin' crazy because it's a really complicated game. And I'm just like, I don't know. I never had a problem with it. I've definitely played weirder and stranger and like unwieldier systems. There's a Hellboy Gurps.
Really?
Yeah. Look.
Oh, wow. So that is an actual Hellboy Gurps book. See, that would have been something that would have come in handy when I was creating my original D&D character. I want to be like Hellboy and Green Arrow. I'm just like, you should have showed me Gurps, Stu. Instead of let me going down that 3.5 path.
The nice thing about the Hellboy book is that it's sized the same as a comic book trade paperback. So you could slide it in with your Hellboy books.
That is smooth. And did Mignola do the art on that?
Yeah. I think the cover is original, but the interior art is just pulled from the comics.
That's great. And you know what? That's a perfect example of, well, if the book doesn't give me enough knowledge, as long as I can make the characters, I've been reading Hellboy and BPRD for years, I can make this work.
This feels like a little bit chunkier, has a little bit tooth more so than the Prisoner. I think I could maybe run a Hellboy game. I'm not sure I want to because I'm not Mike Mignola and I'd rather just read the comics.
True.
But I think that this is a pretty good one. But there's all sorts of Gurp stuff out there. It's crazy. I can't get over the fact that there's been 4 editions, 4 or 5, and they just keep cranking out source books for it.
So how does it work, like, say, for monsters? Like, D&D has a monster manual, obviously.
Yeah.
What about for something like Gurps, since it is, you can kind of build your own heroes?
Every source book has its monsters. Like, the fantasy book has monsters in it.
Oh, okay.
And your horror book will have some sort of monsters in it. And there's also a couple monster books. There's like a Creatures of the Night book, which is like a lot of undead and weird stuff. There's a couple different flavors of source books, which are sort of more generic for a generic universal role-playing system, where it's just like, there's a couple of compendiums and creature books. And like I would even say that there's a sort of a tech subline.
Okay.
Which is like super ultra tech. And then there's vehicles and all of that stuff I feel like is sort of genre agnostic. If you wanted to have sort of crazy riffs style glitter boy mechs that might not necessarily be in a sci-fi setting book so much as sort of like a monster manual for guns.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
That's fun.
Again, you're only limited by what you want to put into your game in terms of as a player playing it and as a GM wanting to have the headache of dealing with it.
Well, you also said that one of the campaigns that you ran was a villains campaign. You guys were the villains.
Yes.
So what was that like? I know in other role-playing systems, it's just essentially, you're just taking your character, you're changing alignment, and you're just kind of going for it. Was it a little more robust when you got to actually build it from the ground up in Gurps?
Kind of, sort of. We were a bunch of idiot villains. We were totally B-listers, or at least I feel like that was the overall.
Oh, you guys were the job squad?
Yeah. I mean,
I love it.
Like, we were a bunch of losers. I think we fought like Santa Claus at one point and got our asses kicked. Like,
of course you did, because you were bad guys. You made the naughty list.
And it was Santa Claus. The alignment stuff isn't baked in, so you could run a really dark campaign.
You know, because alignment is, say, like for Dungeons and Dragons, very ingratiated into how the characters are meant to be played.
Yeah.
So if this has like a sliding scale of alignment, or you're just going to do what you're going to do, that's fun.
Yeah, it's very open and freeing, I think. I feel like the GURPS games that we played were like a really important step in getting away from sort of a narrow system-based thing and being more interested in characters and how they interact. Because like when you have a whole bunch of like weird characters, especially in the Supers book, because it's such a weird clash of things. My character worked at a mall. He was just like some stupid kid, Jim, I think his name was, but he was cursed and he would turn into the Celtic Lord of the Hunt.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it's like,
that's cool.
It's sort of like, it's sort of like Thor, but like also sort of a little bit like the Spectre. And but then he's also hanging out with Sean Dillon's character was like a cat burglar called the Black Cat.
It sounds like a really awesome trauma movie, like waiting to happen.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the third member of your party, Sergeant Kabuki Man, NYPD.
Well, I think George's character was sort of like a supernatural secret agent called Agent 13, who was like had like a skull for a face,
so clever,
a Hellfire gun. So it, like sort of like on the Nick Fury / Ghost Rider kind of thing. But like you put all three of those characters together, and it's like, what are they even doing hanging out? Like none of them fit. Like, how do you have like an Agent 13 hanging out with like a mall? He worked at a Dippin' Dot stand. That's right.
Wait a second. of all places that you'd have your guy work at the mall, not the Wetzel Pretzel,
No.
not the Foot Locker or the Taco Bell,
Yeah.
the Dippin' Dot stand. That is pretty like specific.
Yeah. I've never worked at the mall, let alone, I don't even like Dippin'
I was
Dots.
gonna say, have you ever had Dippin' Dots? They're fucking terrible.
Yeah. But I felt like that was very specific and told me a lot about Jim's character, which is what I'm sort of trying to say, is that like it was very much more character focused.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's so weird.
Yeah.
I learned so much about you from doing this show. Oh,
Ugh.
the mysteries of Stu. So, do you have any other thoughts on Gurps?
I'm just going to hold one more up.
Shut up. So he is holding up a book called Cthulhu Punk, which got to be very conflicting for you because you love Cthulhu, but you hate steampunk.
Well, it's actually cyberpunk. It's a cyberpunk Call of Cthulhu mix.
Oh, wait, yeah, I'll put my glasses on. Oh, my. Yeah. Oh, that's even worse.
I still hate this. Yeah, like I hate everything about it.
But because it's got tentacles, you had to buy it.
Yeah, it's just, but like I love the fact that this is the sort of like weirdo stuff that would come out of Gurps. They actually had their cyberpunk version it had like a lot of hacking in it because, you know, cyberpunk.
Was that Cyberpunk 2020?
It's the same setting as the Cyberpunk 2020 game, but they just ported it over to Gurps rules.
Isn't it also weird that like now it is like we're like 6 months away from it actually being 2020?
Yeah. Well, I think the original first edition of Cyberpunk was 2013.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so we're already past that. So he pushed it up to 2020, and now we're hitting that. I chuckle about that anytime I think about Cyberpunk.
You know, it's the whole Terminator thing. It's like, well, 1997, because in like the 80s, like that's so far off. And now it's just like, oh, so yeah, all that hacking and flying car stuff is not real.
But the hacking, yeah, unfortunately.
Sorry, guys. Spoilers. 2020 is going to come. We got Teslas, but they're on the ground.
Yeah. But the hacking in the Cyberpunk, I guess they approached it in a way that the FBI came to the office. It was just like, what are you doing? And Steve Jackson Games is just like, making games?
As they're wont to do.
And I mean, like, it's particularly just Steve Jackson's always had like an interest in conspiracy theories.
Really?
Yeah, well, they put out the Illuminati board game.
That's right.
And they also published a Principia Discordia at one point too. So like they're into that sort of gonzo psychedelic conspiracy Robert Anton Wilson thing. So writing a book on cyberpunk and having the FBI coming and being like, I don't know about this. I think they might have seized the copies of the book and shut down production for a little while. Like, I don't have my Cyberpunk Gurps book anymore, but there was a note about it in there, and I need to get one of those back.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's a fascinating little chunk of role-playing history.
Oh my God, I would love to actually hear the story from the horse's mouth. Tell me about the day when the FBI knocked on your door because you were making a game.
Yeah. Steve Jackson's still around. We should try and get him on the show.
We should try and get him on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, he created one of my favorite games, Munchkin. So
yeah, there you go.
That I was thinking about it the other day. I think I have like 4 different versions of Munchkin and 5 different versions of Clue in my house currently. And
that's a lot of both of them, really.
Look, you can never get enough Clue. It is the greatest game ever created on this wonderful planet of ours. However, yeah, I do have like 5 copies of it.
Yeah, that's intense.
That's crazy. So do you have any final thoughts on Gurps?
I think that when you hear generic, I think most people think boring.
Right.
And I think that Gurps is the strongest argument that generic doesn't have to be boring. I think that generic can be as crazy and wild and interesting as you want it to be.
Well said, Stu.
Yeah, check out Gurps. It's cool.
Yeah, folks, definitely check out Gurps. We'll definitely have more up on the Instagram feed for you to check out and probably the upcoming months.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of things that have been popping up on our Instagram feed, Stu is literally glowing across the room right now because we are getting ready to start making characters for Pendragon.
There are so many people, I think, right now who are just dying for me to get over Pendragon. I think the people on our Instagram feed are just like, oh God, all he talks about is Pendragon. It's it's the greatest game ever. And like you guys are just like, oh, if we just indulge him and make characters, maybe this will all go away. Maybe we won't have to do it for the next 7 years playing this game that he really loves.
Hey man, do we roll dice? Is it a fantasy role-playing game?
Yeah.
I'm showing up either way. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the character creation?
So the character creation is super cool because we made characters for Hero Quest, remember?
Yes.
We never actually got around to playing Hero Quest because I still don't quite have my brain wrapped around it. But when we went through that, we kind of made the history of the tribe, right? And we answered all these questions, and you learned a little bit about the world and your place in it. Pendragon is the first game that Chaosium did that thing where it was really concerned with putting the characters into the context of the world. So in addition to, rolling up your character and getting your stats and stuff, which is all like pretty straightforward, you're going to recognize a lot of the systems from Call of Cthulhu. You're going to have this sort of 40-year, 50-year thing that we're all going to go through as characters. You're all going to be from the same region. You're all going to be starting together, becoming knights at the same time. So we're going to chart the history of your grandfather and your father and see what battles they fought, who they hate, where they died, how they died.
Oh, so this is a really, really deep, rich backstory. Not the typical, my name is Nego Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die, and then we're going to go loot this dungeon.
Yeah, no, we are going to build out a family history for every character, which is important because when you start the game, your father is going to probably be dead, and you're going to be inheriting his manor. So you're all going to be in the same region. You're all going to be noble people with houses that you have to run. And, and that gives you a certain amount of political weight in the county that you're in, which which sort of propels you into the larger world of, because King Arthur's not around yet. It's his dad, Uther, has gotten the throne in the beginning.
Oh, so we're the prequel.
Yeah. This is a dark age of brutal war and violence and a deep concern for lineage. Like, as soon as you guys start, it's like going to be a race to get married and have kids.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, because you need to secure the line. Because if you don't have kids, the house, everything that your family has worked towards for the last two or three generations is going to disappear. Because
it's
the
a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Sound like I'm having a conversation with my mother. When are you going to get married, Johnny? Just kidding. My mom does not sound like that, nor is she pressuring me to get married in any way, shape, or form. She loves me just as I am.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So how long does it take to make the characters? I mean, I know in most role-playing games, character creation generally could take from a half hour to 3 hours, depending on how much futzing around and if it's your first time at the rodeo.
I think it'll be about an hour and a half, because I feel like we're going to have to sort of do Pendragon school for the basics of the virtues and passions. So the virtues and the passions, I think, is sort of like a weird system that it'll take a little bit of explaining to get through. And I really have no idea how long the actual chronology is going to take. It's at least 40 years, and there's battles and stuff. And there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And all of that stuff directly impacts your characters, because a lot of passions are inherited. So as the Saxons sort of invade Salisbury and mess with your family, your grandfather is going to really start to hate the Saxons, which, because he's, your grandfather, your father lived with that and takes some of his hate for Saxons as a given because he grew up around it, right?
Right.
It's like your racist uncle, is going to create a racist cousin.
Thanksgiving is never not awkward. Gotcha.
But when your father, fights the Saxons, it increases his hate and you inherit some of that. And you also inherit some of their glory. The more great deeds that they do, that trickles down to you because you're,
It's perfect.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on that will sort of help define your character, and theoretically will define your future characters, because the campaign is 80 years long. You should probably have 3 to 4 characters of the same lineage over the course of the game. So it'll be interesting to see how they change, not only from their creation point, but also if you extend it back, you have data about their grandparents to see how the whole line comes together by the end of the campaign.
I think that's really interesting, because in most games, you've got one character.
Yeah.
And you only get a new character when that character dies horribly.
Yeah.
So I love this idea that my character is not a singular character. It is a family over time.
Yeah.
And the life and the tribulations of that family ultimately lead to my final character, who's probably going to die horribly. But either way, that's cool. I mean, that sounds great.
Yeah, if you know anything about the King Arthur stories, everybody's probably going to die horribly at the end.
Well, Stu, I look forward to doing that in the upcoming weeks. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me every day at Vintage RPG on Instagram, posting stuff like this, and also every day at unwinnable.com, where we write cool stuff about nerdy things.
Very cool, Stu. Folks, you can find me on Twitter at Handbreaker, where I'm constantly tweeting about cute animals, professional wrestling, and Dungeons & Dragons. You can also check out my Instagram at John Hambone McGuire, where I'm constantly putting pictures up of my adventures and the podcasts I produce. And speaking of podcasts, my other podcast, My Thai Happy Hour, is always available where podcasts are found. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.